Hey friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We're back with another Meals in Jars video. This time we are going to be cooking up our beef meals in jars. If you missed that video where we canned these together, I will link it in the description box below. But as usual, we have 5 recipes and I will be showing you how I try to stretch 1 quart jar to feed 5 people. Let's get started. In case you haven't heard, we have a Meals in Jars canning cookbook coming soon, and in the description box of this video you will find a link to the landing page for that. You can sign up on the wait list to be notified of its release, and when you do, you'll be automatically entered into our giveaway where we will choose one winner to win a free copy of the cookbook. If you're watching this video at a later date, it's possible the cookbook is already available. If that's the case, you'll be able to access that book in the same link in that same description box. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming tutorials on canning, cooking, food storage, and gardening. Our first recipe is the stroganoff, and we are going to cook this up the typical stroganoff way by serving it over pasta. Normally, stroganoff is served with egg noodles, I believe, but that's not something that we store and really stock and eat in our family, so I'm going to be using rotini noodles instead. The first step is just to get that jar heated up and bring it up to a boil, and then we'll go ahead and get started on our sauce. So to make our sauce, we're going to start with a roux. I want a lot of sauce for this meal to feed 5 people, so I'm going ahead and doubling the amount of roux that I normally do. So we're going to start with 4 tablespoons of butter, which is half a stick, and add 1/4 cup of flour to that. My normal roux is going to be 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of flour, but I find that doubling it is great for large pasta-based dishes like this one. So once we get all that nice and bubbly, and you can see it's golden brown, it's bubbling nicely, it's ready for our milk. And we are going to do 2 cups of milk, stirring it okay, so this time I just remembered I did half and half. So normally you do 2 cups of liquid. I decided to do 1 cup of milk and 1 cup of sour cream, and I'm so glad that I did, because it produced a really great sauce. So the next step is just to season it however you want. We like smoked paprika in our stroganoff. We also like parsley. So I'm not measuring with the spices, just season to taste however you like. This is freeze-dried parsley, so I'm just crushing it because the leaves are kind of a bit bigger since it came from the garden. Getting it all mixed up together. At this point, I would taste it and figure out, does it need salt and pepper? But I don't even think I did salt and pepper in this one. I think it turned out fine. But once your roux, basically your sauce, is done, you want to add that to your meal in a jar that's coming up to a boil in your pot and mix that all together. Now, as I cooked this, I realized that it was not thick enough. And so when I went to feed this to my family, they were like, why is this so runny? I was like, oh yeah. I didn't account for how much liquid was in that jar, in that quart jar. So keep that in mind. I ended up adding just a little bit more roux to thicken it up. You see me using my ground beef masher here. That's because in order to make this meal stretch, you remember those beef cubes were about 2-inch beef cubes, and that's not going to be really enough to feed 5 people. So in order to shred up the beef to get more beef pieces in every bite, that's what I did. I just used this ground beef masher. I love this thing. I use it to really kind of crush up the meat so that we all get a good amount of meat in each bite. So I'm just getting the pasta boiled up. As you see here, I pretty much just use a little bit of salt in my boiling water whenever I'm making pasta, nothing fancy. And like I said, it's really liquidy, and sorry, spills. When I'm filming, I'm usually having to use one hand, so y'all give me grace here for the messes that I make when I'm filming with one hand. But I ended up just adding 2 tablespoons of flour and 2 tablespoons of butter to thicken that up. Like I said, it would have been better if I had have thickened it up first. 7 out of 10 for that one. Okay, next recipe is the Italian beef, and we are going to go ahead and serve this up as sandwiches, and I believe that is the typical thing that is done with Italian beef. You can serve it on hoagies. I think it usually has some mozzarella cheese on it on hoagie buns. I just used some hamburger buns from the store. Again, I am kind of trying to grind this up a little bit to make it more of a shredded beef. So keeping that in mind, whenever you are canning meals in jars, whether it be cubed chicken, cubed beef, cubed venison, you can shred it up really easily and have more of like a shredded chicken or like a shredded beef. So I wanted to show you very quickly how I prep my buns for whenever I'm making something like this. Even if you are not a big fan of mayonnaise, you might want to give it a try because it just gives the buns a great flavor. It really doesn't have a heavy mayonnaise taste. But once we get these all prepared, we're going to broil them on low for just about 30 seconds to a minute, just long enough to get them nice and golden brown, ever how long that takes in your oven. But toasting it with this mayonnaise, like I said, it doesn't have a strong mayonnaise flavor. It just makes the buns really extra flavorful. And then I just topped it with the Italian sandwich meat. I didn't put any cheese on it this time. If I had some provolone on hand, I would have. But it was just fine without it. This was an excellent, excellent meal. The whole family agreed that this needs to go into our regular rotation whenever we get some beef sales. And I'm going to try it with venison as well. So 10 out of 10, hands down, fantastic meal. Okay, next up is our Mexican beef. This is the one that did not seal, so I put it in the fridge and ended up using it first. But anyway, we are going to turn this into quesadillas. So in order to make it stretch for my family of 5, that 1 quart jar really isn't going to do it. So I typically like to add both beans and rice. And in this today, I use black beans. Sometimes I use pinto beans, but I almost always cook my rice in my pressure cooker. 5 minutes is all it takes, equal parts rice and water if you do it in the Instapot or pressure cooker. Once that's done, I go ahead and add that, and what that rice does, it not only helps stretch the meal, but it's going to help soak up some of that liquid from that quart jar so that we're not working with just a liquidy mess. So I ended up letting it cook with the lid off until the rice has soaked up most of that water, and then I just start preparing the quesadilla. Nothing fancy here, just some cheese and then putting that meat on there. If you make your own instant rice or minute rice from the store, you can see how it kind of thickened up. But you can put that straight into your pot and not have to prepare your rice first. That's one of the excellent reasons to go ahead and dehydrate your rice. That's all instant rice is. It's just rice that's been cooked and then dehydrated. We have a tutorial on that on the channel. If you're interested, you can just use the search bar, and I'll try to link it below as well. But this is a quick and easy meal that we do with anything that we have Mexican or taco flavored meals in jars. We will make quesadillas and burritos out of it at least once a week usually. So 10 out of 10, hands down, can't go wrong with a good quesadilla. Okay, next meal, excuse me, next meal in the jar is going to be our pot roast. So this one, I'm not going to stretch it as far as making it a one-pot meal. I'm just going to stretch it with side dishes. And that's another great way to stretch meat, is not necessarily stretching the meat itself, but just offer several side dishes so that the meat portion can be smaller. And then that quart jar was able to feed all of us. So all I did for this pot roast was bring it up to a boil, and I did not shred this one. Since it was a pot roast, I did want to keep those chunks nice and chunky. We decided to serve mashed potatoes with this. We just whipped up some instant potatoes, nothing fancy. Didn't have time to make them from scratch. I always keep potato flakes on hand for quick and easy suppers. And then we made our favorite squash casserole. This is an absolute fantastic side dish. We love it. And that is all we did for this meal. We always have chopped up salad ready to go in the fridge for anyone who would like to add that onto their meal as well. And several people usually choose to do that. I will say that the red wine in this pot roast dish was way too strong for our family, and for that reason, we scored it a 6 out of 10. Next time, we will just completely leave that cooking wine out, and I think it'll be fine. Okay, so last but not least is our pot pie filling, and we're going to make a pot pie, basically casserole for this dish. So the first step is simply to, once again, dump and go, heat it up, and bring that to a boil. And in order to turn this into a creamy pot pie filling, we need to add a roux. So to cook up that roux, we just need 4 tablespoons of butter and a quarter cup of flour. I doubled my normal roux for this one as well, since it's going to be going into a casserole dish. So 4 tablespoons of butter, a quarter cup of flour, and let that get nice and bubbly. Now at this point, we would normally add our liquid like a milk or a broth, but remember how much liquid is in that quart jar. And it's essentially beef broth. So we are just going to allow that to be our liquid, and we're just going to add this butter flour mixture straight into our pot, and it will thicken up our meal in a jar beautifully. As you whisk it in, you will see that it thickens up beautifully and turns into that kind of pot pie filling that we all know and love. And that's all we have to do for the pot pie filling part. Now for the crust part, of course, you have plenty of options here. I like to use our pancake mix, which I think I'm just going to change the name to all-purpose mix because I've been trying this out in all sorts of things and have loved it in everything that I've tried it in. But it was originally a pancake mix that I made it for. But it's going to be 2 2/3 cup of the pancake mix with 2 cups of water. Now, our pancake mix, I'm going to read off the ingredients real quick for anyone who wants it. This is our master blend, so this makes a lot. It's going to be 6 cups of flour, 1.5 cups of buttermilk powder, 1/3 cup of sugar, 3 tablespoons baking powder, 1 tablespoon baking soda, and 3 teaspoons of salt. That's the master mix. So, for this pot pie filling, we use 2 2/3 cups of that mix that I just mentioned, 2 cups of water, 2 eggs, as you just saw, and then 4 tablespoons of some type of oil. We are getting rid of almost all other oils in our household. We're in the process of doing that. We still use olive oil pretty heavily, and we're going to keep on using coconut oil because we use that in our skincare and stuff like that anyway. So it's kind of pulls double duty. But other than that, we are switching over to lard and getting rid of all of those seed oils and stuff like that. And then that's it. That's our crust. So this pan, I usually make this in a 9x13 pan. It was right after Thanksgiving when I made this, and I left my pan at my family get together. So this is the step down from that pan. I don't remember the dimensions, but because I'm using a smaller pan, you're going to see that the pot pie crust is going to be a whole lot thicker than it should be or than it normally is. But just keep in mind that I normally use a 9x13 for this, and it's a great ratio between the crust and the pot pie filling. But for this particular time, because of the smaller pan, it's going to be a lot thicker than normal. But that's okay. It still turned out fantastic. So we need to bake this in the oven for 350 degrees for about 25 minutes. Depending on the size of your pan, that may end up not taking 375 degrees, I'm sorry. But just go by the size of your pan because you might need to adjust that time. But for this size pan, 25 minutes did the job. And I will scoop this out so that you can see here, but you can see that the breading was a lot more than the pot pie filling, but that wouldn't happen with a 9x13 dish. This was an excellent meal. We've loved all of the pot pie meals that we have done, and it is so versatile. We absolutely love it. 10 out of 10 for this recipe. Highly recommend the pot pie filling. That's all for today, y'all. We'll see you next time. Bye.